You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs. I have a very interesting guest today. The guest goes by the name of Doomberg, D-O-O-M-B-E-R-G. Doomberg writes a weekly column on various financial and energy matters, primarily energy. I find it to be incredibly informative. It's available on Substack, so there's a free and a paid version. But again, regardless, the content's incredibly detailed and informative. Doomberg really goes deep on a lot of these economic issues that I think, major media and, well, frankly, any media just give at best a surface treatment to. So if you really want to know what's going on, let's say with, the green energy agenda or other things like that, I highly recommend the column. The bio says that they started writing Doomberg in May of 2021. Purpose was to highlight fundamentals missing from a lot of economic and policy decisions. And this is where I mentioned that, again, they go really deep. So we're going to talk about where Doomberg came from and various issues that are affecting us today. So welcome, Doomberg. Thank you.
Richard, great pleasure to be here. Who doesn't want to be discovered on the Finding Genius podcast?
Well, tell me a bit about, whatever you can about your origin story. How did you start writing this column and where did the character Doomberg come from?
Yeah, so we are a very small team of former executives in the commodity sector, which is, I think, a voice that is missing in the energy debate and the climate change debate and the policy debates that necessarily flow from those sometimes heated discussions. And what we find in the modern media is a bunch of people that predominantly work in universities or have only ever served in government dominating the discourse. And we viewed that as a market inefficiency that, given our experience, we might be able to occupy. Our origin story is we started a consulting business after wrapping up our industrial careers, and then COVID hit and we all had to change our business focus like many small business owners. And at the suggestion of a good friend on Wall Street, we started consulting content creators who sell into Wall Street as sort of consultants at the beginning. And then we found that we could probably do that. And one of our clients strongly recommended that we start our own thing, most importantly because we would follow all of our own suggestions, right? And so we did, and we got together, we formed, and the brand ambition really was born out of, we're sort of natural doom scrollers. And we're just sort of brainstorming one day and we thought about Chicken Little, the sky's falling. And then we created a character of Chicken Little pecking away on a Bloomberg terminal, looking for things to worry about. And so that was how sort of Doomberg was born. And the tagline in the beginning was, Chicken Little gets a terminal. And we thought it would be funny. There's a lot of people sort of in our targeted demographic that maybe have achieved semblance of success in life. They're sort of obsessed with preserving it or worried about losing it. And this is why we think doom scrolling is kind of very popular, at least in our demographic, and we're certainly subject to it ourselves. And so the whole concept of Doomberg just sort of, exactly what you're getting. And that's how it started. And over time, of course, as we've gotten better and we have grown beyond anything we could have possibly imagined when we started, we've gotten sort of a bit more professional, a bit more serious, and do these deep dives that you described in your opening introduction. And it truly is what we were meant to be doing, which is an enormous blessing. And I say, I tell friends and people that we mentor that when you do, if you're lucky enough to stumble upon what it is that you were meant to be doing in life, for heaven's sake, just keep doing it. And then just doing it for the better part of 2.5 years, we've blown away our wildest dreams. And we've been very careful to not recalibrate what our wildest dreams are, to sort of mentally and internally spin a life-changing win into some form of a defeat. And we just, we publish 6 to 8 times a month on topics that we happen to know a fair bit about and have a unique voice on, and it really resonates with our audience. And so it's really been an amazing, thrilling ride.
I mean, what's the goal of your publication? Is just to get a deep dive on energy policy and other related issues out there. So your audience, if you're reaching now a lot of high-level decision makers? Do you feel like you're influencing people that have the potential to influence policy?
What created Doomberg and the brand, we're very systematic about building a business around it. We're very authentic with our audience from the beginning, our earliest followers, about our intent to eventually create this into a paid newsletter and have it become the thing that we do for a living, which it has become. And we're very careful to define sort of what we call the 5 pillars of our business: brand, channel, technology, demand creation, and operations. And under the brand umbrella, we spend a lot of time dwelling on our ideal clients and who they are, and we create character sketches for them. And our objective is to delight our ideal clients. Like any business can be described through the lens of its ideal clients and who they are, where they hang out, how do you find them, how do you entice them, and how do you delight them. And our ideal clients are, pretty sophisticated consumers of the news who happen to have some sway in the public discourse, either because they work on Wall Street or they work in industry or they work in government. And our objective is to be provocative without being polarizing, to be funny without being silly, and to teach without being self-indulgent. And we have a view of the world. We happen to think it's the correct view because we have obviously decades of experience on our team and are authentic people, and we would never write something we don't believe. And so to the extent that we can participate in the debate, to shape the discourse, to delight our ideal clients and make a living doing it, then this is what we sort of call a quadruple win. And that's our real objective.
Are you able to say if there's been any surprising people that subscribe to your list or reply to your content? You're like, wow, I didn't know we reached that person. That's great.
I would say, sure, just the size of the audience is surprising. And then once you have such an audience, they say you never want to meet your heroes, but we've been able to meet a sizable number of people that we really respect in the content space. And it's been a thrill. So a small example, Jim Grant at Grant's Illustrated Observer is a subscriber and now has become a friend in our real lives. And, people like Grant Williams and Tony Greer and all these other content creators that have been able to sort of carve out brand and a business in the space that we've been able to interact with, get to know, help, and be helped by, and ultimately become friends with is pretty amazing. And if you'd have told us when we started this journey at the depths of COVID, when we lost the majority of our old consulting business through no actions of our own, of course, that we would be, on a friendly basis with somebody like Jim Grant or Grant Williams, we wouldn't have believed you. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. So again, what do you hope to accomplish in addition to delighting customers? What I can see, I guess there's a couple questions here. So one is, your recent post about possibly not posting much or at all on X or Twitter because of what's going on there. The content creators that I followed on YouTube and various major media channels, online, they seem to have to go towards sensationalism, clickbait. Oh my God, this time it's really the end, that kind of thing. You guys don't do that. You have a very calm, slightly sarcastic, but it's funny, but a very calm analysis of what's going on with various issues. How and why are you able to maintain that when so many other creators seem to, again, go towards hyperbole?
So this is a very important point. We used to write more often these pieces called The Work of My Life, where we would describe the progress of the project and get our most loyal supporters to help us along the way and share the data and metrics around it. And we wrote one about the disease of more, which is something that people tend to fall into, which is why I said earlier about our strong desire to not recalibrate what beyond our wildest dreams means, to not move the goalposts. So in full disclosure, we are making more than enough money, doing only what we love all day, accepting no useless meetings. We have this ratio that we optimize and measure internally called what is our get to, have to ratio, and how can we grow it? So how much of our time is spent doing things that we would characterize as we get to do that? Like I get to be on this podcast. I was looking forward to it versus, when you file your taxes, that would be distinctly in the have to category. Well, what is that ratio? How much of your time are you spending on get to versus have to? And how can you grow it? How can you outsource the have tos or just eliminate them from your life by simply not doing them? When you have way more than enough, the pursuit of more becomes a disease. And I too observe content creators selling their brands out in the name of more when they clearly, by all normal people's measures, have way more than enough. And so we're not going to, in fact, we're debating internally. I'll just give you a small factoid. We spent precisely $0 generating our list. It's all been sweat equity, earned traffic by podcast appearances or when we built our Twitter account, and I'm happy to talk about why we left it. Everything has been a very small team, waking up every day, studying the data, understanding what we need to do, staying within our brand and working hard, push the number up, right? Wake up, make the number go up and repeat. That's one of our phrases internally. And we studied the data. Why did this piece not land? And what could we do to make it land a little better within the context of our brand? So our view is the brand is everything. And brand is a gut feeling, right? The gut feeling we wish to induce in our ideal clients is the following. When our email arrives in their inbox, they say to themselves, ooh, I get to read that. Behavior strays from that brand in the pursuit of clickbait, in the pursuit of volume, in the pursuit of, numbers over quality, then we will have destroyed the essence of what Doomberg was meant to be. And in our view, the value of the brand so far exceeds what we could ever possibly need. Why would we risk it?
It's good.
And it can work. Like we've observed people who are just raw numbers, right? Like, for example, I subscribe to a relatively alternative newspaper's free email list, and I am the recipient of 4 emails a day from this organization, which I won't name, but you would all know it, begging me in various ways to sign up. And it's a very simple formula, and I see it, and they pound and pound and pound and pound. That's not our business model. That's not our brand. The moment we slip into that, we lose the essence of it. The entire brand proposition to our ideal clients is authentic, deep dives on complex topics, written in a language that is accessible with a touch of humor, a willingness to admit when we're wrong and to correct the record if we're ever, meaningfully in error, and totally responsive to our customers. Every single email gets responded by either me, the head writer, or the editor-in-chief of Doomberg. Every comment on Substack to one of our pieces gets a direct response from me, the head writer. We are a very, very small team. We've hired nobody. We've spent nothing on domain creation. And we joke internally that if we hired 10 people, we'd be 20% more effective.
It's funny.
We are super lean, the lean startup, right? And we eat what we kill. It all accrues to us. We've taken on no outside money. We've resisted the temptation to be. We have people approach us to buy us and all the various things that happen when you have what looks like to be an overnight success. This is what we were meant to do in life. We're going to keep doing it. And for years, we just show up, make the number go up and repeat and enjoy life and be with our families. And we work surprisingly manageable hours. And, life's too short for the disease of more. I mean, the story we told in that piece was, imagine being Tom Brady, multiple Super Bowl winner, multiple most valuable player in the NFL, married to a supermodel, Giselle Brunson, and yet still selling out his reputation to Sam Bankman-Fried and FDX. What a disease. And I would rather make do with 1/100th of what Tom Brady has than to sell out our brand. And that's just who we are and how we intend to make the most out of this life-changing miracle that has befallen us.
No, it's excellent. I was going to say, this is not to puff you up or anything, but when I look at various, again, content creators and everything is hyperbole and what they're saying in their headline is not delivered, or maybe they'll give you one snippet of something in their content piece, then I start to ignore them because it's like, yeah, I know. Hey, look, there's a picture of them holding their head in their hands. The end is near. This is the 55th time they've said it. And I know that whatever they say in their headline, even though it's compelling, is just not going to show up in the content. So it's like, I turn a deaf ear now. But your guys' stuff doesn't come too often. When I see it, it comes into a busy email box I have. So I forward it to a much quieter one and I star it and then I leave it there to be read, in the next day or so. So just giving you some, inside baseball just on how I treat your stuff, but I know what I'm going to get. I'm always going to get a great analysis that'll interest me and things I had no clue about. And that, I'm not in a position where I guess I've made decisions based on the energy issues you bring up, but it definitely informs my worldview. So I just want to thank you for your formula. At least for me, it's working. And that's feedback that I hope helps you.
No, this is the exact ambition that we hope to achieve with our ideal clients. And so as part of the 5 pillars of our business, one of them is operations. And we have a 25-point checklist for each piece. What's the title? What's the 1-sentence summary, which becomes the social preview? Do we deliver against that social preview exactly as you just articulated? What is the opening story that gets people interested? How do we sort of convert to the things we want to say? Do we say them? Do we have the data to support it? Do we provide our homework? You'll notice we have an enormous amount of links in our pieces so that the readers can go and verify the work that we've done so that it doesn't look like we're manipulating. And what's the thumbnail? You might notice that whenever we provide a chart or a picture in our piece, we occasionally try to put a little humor in the caption. And every single objective in our belief is that if it can be measured, it can be optimized. And we have a mindset of continuous improvement. So feedback like that is invaluable. Thank you for giving it. It's exactly our objective. And in anything in life, if you start out with a reasonable plan, you're willing to find out what the price is and to pay it, and you have a mindset of continuous improvement, success is inevitable. That last part is the most important part. Our piece, I can't read our first pieces, but if we hadn't done our first pieces, which are insufferable to me today to read because they're just cringy, we would not have had that foundation from which to improve. And we're still improving. Today's edit day for me. You caught me in a good time. And so I get the day off and I get to think about the next piece, but that piece is going to publish tomorrow and we're going to see how it does. It's an interesting piece. It's one that you would not have probably realized, which is that Australia has a massive diesel refining crisis and can't refine its own oil anymore. And given Australia's critical importance to metals and coal and various energy and timber markets, this is a underappreciated risk to the global economy. And that's going to be the piece. And have we reached it early? And have we done it? And is it tight? And how much do we put ahead of the paywall versus when do we go behind the paywall? And this is piece number 225. And I'm I couldn't be more excited to publish it and to learn from the data that flows from what happens after we hit send. And you can hear the passion in my voice. It's not something you can fake. And so there is no clickbaity, spend a bunch of money to make slightly more money and repeat strategy that we have found that works. What we have found that works is authentically do what you're meant to be doing and keep doing it.
I don't know if there's a wish for this, but, people that get your pieces and they say, oh, I want to know more about aluminum production. You guys had a great article on it. Do you guys offer any consulting or advisory services for people that want to go further? You're doing research for an entity.
We have a residual consulting business where we've kept the best clients that we had from our old business, which again was largely torpedoed by COVID. But no, we don't do that. And here's why. We're a very, very small team. I say that you could count the number of people that are on the Doomberg team on one hand and have several fingers left over. And we have decided that the magic is worth preserving. So there's lots of things we could do, again, in the sort of pursuit of more. We could take on sponsors, we could take on we could do branded posts, we could create a consulting business and outsource it to other people to deliver whatever it is that these people want. We're going to do none of those things. We're going to just keep doing what we're meant to be doing, which is research, writing, editing, publishing, and promoting 6 to 8 pieces a month and generating way more than enough for the families involved. Now, when we do have a pro tier, which is a higher level tier, which in addition to getting our pieces gets a monthly webinar with the Doomberg team and open Q&A and access to a special email where we will, of course, respond to inquiries, but we never solicit that list or consulting business nor charge for any analysis that we would do. They're just a select group of our biggest fans who would like to pay us a little more, but also get a little bit more access to the Doomberg team. But no, we certainly could peruse that list for consulting clients, and we know how to build a consulting business. We used to have one. But the consulting business, Richard, is all about selling time, whereas the subscription business is about scaling time. We have a finite amount of time. It was meant to be deployed against creating the Doomberg subscription business. And once we fall into the trap of reaching for more, we risk losing the magic. And the magic is very important to us. And look, I could tell you, I've had a pretty good career. I had a pretty good education track record. I'm a PhD and I was an executive, and I led teams with hundreds and hundreds of PhDs all over the world working on renewable energy projects and alternative energy projects and commodity projects. I've been all over the world. There's nothing that gives me more pride than the Doomberg experiment and the past 2.5 years and the work that this small team has done. And I'm so hesitant to risk any of it by reaching for more. I'm more than happy with more than enough. And far too few people in our society ever get to achieve that. And gosh darn it, as hard as we've worked, why would I move the goalposts? And so I know that was a bit of a longer answer than you might have expected. But no, we have actively turned down probably a couple of dozen solicitations for consulting work. We'll help for free. We'll have a phone call. We'll jump on a Zoom call. We've probably helped 40 or 50 other Substack authors as they've tried to build their audience and learned a lot from that as well. We'd much rather give it away, surf the sea of abundance. Look, once money changes hands, relationships change. And there's just no getting around that. And so we're busy enough delighting our ideal clients, responding to emails, responding to comments, writing the next piece. Look, as soon as I get off this podcast, even though it's edit day and it publishes tomorrow, I'm on the next piece. I got to think about what the next piece is. I've got 4 or 5 ideas in my head, but if I don't settle on something by tomorrow, or I'm going to be late. We're publishing every 3 to 5 days and start to finish. Very small team. And so I don't have the bandwidth for consulting, and I would much rather scale time than sell it.
That makes sense. In terms of the research that you do, how long did it take you to do research early on versus now? I mean, I would guess, again, since you're doing continuous improvement or Kaizen on everything, you probably refined your research method where it works really well for you. Any useful tidbits of info on how you've improved that process for yourself?
Yeah. So our advantage, of course, is that we have decades of industrial experience to rely upon it. And in particular, in my career, there was a period of time in my career where I was at the center of a lot of research money flowing into the commodity energy space. And through that experience, I was able to develop what we call internally sort of a molecular map of how the world actually worked. And so a typical Doomberg piece is we'll stumble upon a news item which triggers a story that we remember from decades ago or years ago or weeks ago. And we can connect that story to the piece and put a different spin on the piece with 4 or 5 other pieces of data that we then research and fill in the story. And then it comes together very quickly after that. And so that's just the formula that works for us. But whatever it is that you're passionate about, a very similar formula works, sort of the hook, story, offer, standard marketing strategy for content, right? I mean, if you don't catch the audience's attention early, they're going to leave you. And then if you don't, give them the story, and then, the author is finished reading the piece in our case. And so it works that way. But we do have just next piece about Australia and their lack of diesel refining. We saw a story where a single crane dropped a compressor at a refinery in Australia, and that has knocked out 50% of Australia's domestic refining capacity for 3 months.
Oh my God.
Well, what does that tell you about the state of Australia's domestic refining capacity? And we knew intuitively, since they're so critical for coal and timber and lithium and, pick your favorite metal, they're one of the mining capitals of the world. If they can't refine their own diesel, and we knew sort of intuitively that these mega refineries in Asia were putting small refineries out of business. And once we dug into the details, the systematic decay of Australia's refining capacity and its ever-increasing reliance on imports puts them in an incredibly vulnerable spot. And then the story that we tied to it was a book I read in high school called On the Beach. I'm not sure if you've ever read that book. It's a story of some Australians waiting for a radioactive cloud of death to arrive because the Northern Hemisphere has gone full nuclear and killed itself. And everybody knows date certain when that cloud is coming. And the book is sort of a horrifying and very sad story of how each of these individuals, approach end of life. And how does that connect to Australian refining? Well, the story only works as Australia, as the setting for the story, because of its remoteness. And Australia is incredibly remote. And anybody who's ever traveled over Asia and decided to make a stop in Australia knows just how long that flight is from basically any airport in Asia to Australia. They're very remote, they're very isolated, and they cannot refine their own diesel, and their entire economy relies on diesel. And our access to their critical resources also relies on diesel. And this is the story of the piece. And the one-sentence summary of the piece, which becomes the social preview, is something to the effect of Australia's diesel crisis is an underappreciated threat to the global economy. So when you get that email and you forward it to your account and you're going to see the social preview, you know that we're going to deliver against that one-sentence summary.
No, that makes sense. When you look at I know you have many, many years of experience, and your team does, again, in the energy sector, and you spoke about the different positions you've been in briefly. But now that you're doing this research, now that you've done 225 pieces, what does the totality of it look like to you? Do you guys sit back and reflect and go over the pieces and what you learned, and now do you have a very different picture of the world than before, where you had that already from working in industry for so long?
I say we have a far more refined picture of the world. Like the pixelation is much more defined. The broad strokes of what we believe to be true, which are based on physics, have held, but interesting nuances and tidbits of knowledge and tactics and interconnectivities that we've learned as a part of that. There's no question. There's sort of a network effect that as we write more and more pieces, our knowledge and our ability to connect dots becomes much more strong. And so we've been able to grow in quality with our audience, which of course is why I find it so difficult to read the old pieces. And in fact, there's this enormous benefit for us. When we first started this, we wondered whether we would run out of things to write about. But the speed with which we are filling in those pixels allows us to more quickly identify a news story, a headline, and boom, a piece is born. And pieces aren't super long. We are cognizant of people's ever-reducing attention spans. The ideal Doomberg piece takes 6 to 8 minutes to read. We have an expression internally, which may be a little bit harsh, but we like to say any idiot can say a lot with a lot of words. We pride ourselves on the density of information and the brevity with which we can relay a relatively interesting set of facts mixed in with a bit of humor and light sarcasm. And so a very, very important part of this is the power of an outstanding editor. Many writers confuse editing with proofreading, and they're radically different things. We have a world-class editor on the team and really hand in glove. And once I hand off the piece, I have the lack of an ego to worry about whether certain phrases or certain flows makes it into the final piece. I don't care. Like, I trust that our editor is going to turn whatever it is that I turned into something really good, and that our audience will love it because we've done it 225 times, and we know. So, yeah.
I don't know if you have this. I don't think so, but is there a way or a wish, or would it be helpful? I mean, for me, it would, if you're able to add an audio component where the article can be read to you instead of reading it. Some people are just very auditory like myself. Be cool. Just a suggestion for you if you want to.
I think Substack actually already allows that, but I'm not sure. I couldn't do it because I am not capable of pronouncing some of the words that we write. And so I have an insecurity about that. We have had that request. I would say it's less than 1% of our subscribers who feel that strongly about it. Substack as a platform is a written platform and draws readers. For example, we have had various social media gurus reach out to us talking about how we should be converting these into YouTube videos or TikTok videos or Instagram videos, and we've done none of that. And maybe that's dumb of us, but we are writers. We believe in the written word, and that's the market that we're trying to occupy.
Well, actually, because the organization is Doomberg and there's no names or anything, and again, you don't post on certain channels, I would guess your attack surface maybe a lot less. I don't know. I hope it hasn't happened, but have your articles been attacked by people saying, it's conspiracy theory or any of that stuff? Or you don't really get that, maybe because you don't engage in hyperbole?
So if you spend enough time on the internet looking for people saying bad things about you, I can guarantee you one thing: you will find them. We just don't care. We write authentically. We write for our ideal clients. We have closed our comments section to paying subscribers, which helps. We like to joke that if you would like to troll us, that's fine, but you have to pay us for the privilege. We have left Twitter for a variety of reasons, and we're still active on Notes, which is Substack's sort of variant of Twitter. But by and large, we have learned over the years that if you're going to have any semblance of a public persona, there will be people who are jealous of your success, who will try to slipstream into your social media audience to grab attention for themselves. None of these people matter. And so our objective is to delight our ideal clients. Now, if we put a piece out and a half a dozen of our pro tier subscribers sent us a scathing email, that would be data that we would count. I would view trolls as noise.
Good.
And so when you know what you were meant to be doing, what other people think of you, look, if our friends or our family or people in the content world that we respect were suddenly reaching out to us saying, what are you doing? You sound a little angry in this piece, or this piece crossed the line from provocative to polarizing, or this piece was a little silly. I mean, I thought you guys were a serious organization. That would make us take a step back. We're not immune to criticism from the right sources. And we have our trusted friends and contacts and key ideal customers that we've gotten to know over time. People that comment on all our pieces or routinely send us emails. If one of those reached out to us and gave us a forceful critique of something we wrote or something we said on a podcast, that would give us pause. But strangers on the internet who are looking to cancel people because they don't like their opinions, or, we could care less. Really, it's quite a liberating way to live.
No, that's excellent. Again, with all this research you've done, I don't know, what's your overall view on where is the world heading? Do you see that we're kind of headed for disaster? Do you see that we've become, again, as a society, just corrupt? Or do you think things will right themselves and kind of go better? Or do you think that we're headed for, let's say, a number of crises? What's your overall view as of this point, the West over the next few years?
All of the above. I think we are on a deeply naive path, which is truly the luxury of the temporarily rich. And I think we will be embarking upon a series of rolling crises. And so in the short to medium term, we are bearish, but in the long term, we are bullish, because we do believe that in the long term, once, the turning of these crises runs its course, that what comes out on the other end, inevitably, we think, because we're bullish, the human spirit will be better. We have a lot of problems in society today. And so the status quo is not good. And it might be that those problems will increase before the tide goes out and we have some return to normalcy. But right now, politically, economically, even scientifically, the world is heading towards a period of concerning turbulence. But Doomberg is slightly hyperbolic by design, and deep down, if you are a longtime reader of our work, you would know that we are pretty optimistic. We know the path forward. We believe we know the path forward, and we're willing to articulate it and to advocate for it. And we do believe that citizen advocacy is still a thing. I think the corruption that we see, especially in the U.S., is necessarily a temporary thing, because otherwise the prospect of it persisting is one that we should all shudder. And by the way, this is a bipartisan issue. We are politically aware, but we try to be apolitical in our analysis. But all of this is sort of temporary. We do think that, once the crises abate and sober heads are forced to engage. Right now, there's an awful lot of talented, ethical people that will not engage in politics because it's just a sewer. And that can't end well, but it has to end. And eventually there has to be sort of a new way forward. We do believe there will be a new way forward, and we want to be prepared for that and to have our positions laid out and to help others do the same.
Well, this may be I don't know if you want to do this, but if you were able to project yourself into the mind and body and experience of just a regular person, let's say in the US, what do you think that they're experiencing? Are they getting anywhere near, through news and other media, are they getting any reality, or is it a complete distortion? Are they merely just a puppet for various interests that will use media to push or sway their opinion in one direction or another? Like, what's your assessment, I guess, of the average person? There's nothing wrong with them. What kind of environment are they swimming in, do you believe?
There is a troubling trend of algorithmically dividing people into narrow buckets and feeding them exactly what it is that those algorithms think they want to hear. I do think there's a degrading of the public discourse, and the loss of the credibility of the traditional media outlets is unfortunate. And I do think Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and all these algorithms are constantly studying everyday citizens and feeding them the exact things that will most confirm their biases, and the ability to have a reasoned debate where the objective is not to cancel the other person, but to learn from the other person is becoming more rare. That is the current trend. That doesn't mean it's the inevitable one. And I do think the average person is more concerned about the price of food, the price of gasoline, the price of electricity, the price of housing, the price of education, the price of healthcare. And the elites that run our country are so out of touch with the average person. We do have a significant advantage in that we live in flyover country, in a rural part of flyover country. And we have a different view than, say, the politicians who live in DC or the professors who work on the big campuses whose, salaries are literally guaranteed by tenure. We do have a slightly more realistic view into the world. And the average person, when they're not being fed bite-sized quanta of dopamine hits by the algorithms, is more worried about the fact that the grocery bills are 14% higher than they were last year. Yet the man on the television is telling them that inflation is under control. And I do worry that lost in trust in our basic institutions is a real challenge, and perhaps one of the greatest challenges to getting from this period of trouble to a rebirth on the other side of it.
Are there a topic that you guys want to cover, but you just feel like it wouldn't be coherent with the brand to do so? Do you feel like there's topics that are necessary that you're going to have to start covering and maybe expand beyond what you're doing, or just change it, or it'll keep working and you'll never run out again as for now? What are we going to write about? But now it seems like there's endless things.
So it's a great question. We have a very firm rule that if we would never write about it, we don't tweet about it, we don't talk about it on podcasts. And our secondary component of that rule is we generally should have some semblance of expertise with something new to add to the discussion before we would embark on it. So there's a whole swath of hot button issues that you will never see Doomberg tweet about when we're on Twitter, post about on Notes, or write about. You pick your favorite hot button issues of the day: race, gender, sexual orientation. These are all serious issues with complicated questions to be answered by society, but we have nothing particularly useful to add to those conversations. They tend to very quickly dissolve into polarized, closed-minded sort of debates. And so we just stay away from them. And we focus on, we stick to our knitting: energy, finance, the economy at large. We have a pretty strong finance background on the team. We have a very strong energy background on the team. We have good pattern recognition. We know how to tell a good story, but we will avoid button. Now, look, we're not afraid to get into the arena on climate change and renewable energy and solar and wind and nuclear and natural gas and coal and oil and carbon capture, and pick your favorite, where we have some expertise to deploy and where our brand is sort of conditioned our readers to expect us to write about those things. But the Doomberg Twitter account, for example, was never my personal Twitter account. And no matter how I felt about whatever Supreme Court decision was being handed down that day, we would never articulate that through the Doomberg Twitter account, because that's not what that Twitter account was for. I have my own personal views, but it doesn't mean that we should express all of them through the Doomberg Twitter account. The purpose of Doomberg is to delight our ideal clients in the areas where we have some expertise to add, and we could shape the discourse. And so, there's all manner. For example, we won't be endorsing any political candidates in the 2024 election. We might comment on their policies, and we might be, say, critical of Robert Kennedy Jr.'s rather silly stance against nuclear power. And we might be supportive of Joe Manchin's position around the need for natural gas pipelines across the U.S. And we might support Gavin Newsom's decision to keep Diablo Canyon open. And we might be, very critical of Mitch McConnell's decision to trade off some important energy policy in the name of politics or getting some judges approved. But we are not going to be a political first publication. There are plenty of those. The number one publication on Substack is a relatively left-wing leaning off, and she does a really fantastic job of delighting her ideal clients. It's rather partisan for our taste, but we would never embark upon such adventures because that's not the work of our life. It's not where we have any expertise to add, and nobody's coming to Doomberg for those things. So why would we try to force feed it?
Yeah, you're very zen about the whole thing, but it works, makes sense. The product's excellent.
I appreciate that.
Let's tell listeners, how can they get exposed to your content? Where can they go?
Yeah, the only place to find us is at doomberg.substack.com. And embedded within there, you'll see our participation on Substack's notes. Free subscribers get a preview to every piece, and occasionally we will also publish a free one or highlight that list, podcast appearance or two. And then obviously we're 100% subscriber supported, and our paying subscribers they're the spoon that stirs the dish, and they get the full access to the Doomberg team as we described earlier. So doomberg.substack.com. And Richard, it's probably not the conversation we both thought we would have at the beginning, but actually it was quite an enjoyable one, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, we didn't go into tons of specifics, but I think it was very, very useful and instructive. Just the way you have your values, you understand what you're doing, you understand what will be crossing a line for you, everything's well-defined, continuous improvement. I think there's a lot of lessons in what we discussed, so I'm not worried. I think it was very useful, and I'm glad you came, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Me too. Appreciate it, and looking forward to coming back next time, Richard.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.